Chapter 11, what we're going to be talking about is this. We're going to be talking about contracts, okay? And when we're talking about contracts, what we have to talk about is several different contract types, okay? Different contract types, different statuses that contracts could be, and what would be an essential legal element of a contract, okay? So the first thing that I like to do whenever we talk about contracts is talk about the legal essential elements of a contract. And how I remember that is clock. It's C-L-O-C, clock without a K. So what we need to have a binding, legal, enforceable contract is competent parties, legality of the object, offer and acceptance, and also consideration. And consideration could be that of good or valuable. Okay, could be good or valuable. Right, so those are the essential elements that we need to have a valid contract, okay? So now that we've kind of outlined that and we have that on the side, let's talk about the different things that a contract could be. And let me explain to you what I'm talking about. So a contract is either going to be bilateral or unilateral. They're also going to be implied or expressed. And they're also going to be either executory or executed, okay? So let's talk about these for a second. And when I'm talking about contracts, I'm talking about I'm just talking about contract law. I'm saying you want to buy my guitar off me. That's a contract, okay? So what happens is I'm not talking specifically in the realm of real estate, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, okay? Because of course that's relevant information, but what we're really going to be touching on tonight is just talking about contracts in general. So I don't want you to get pigeonholed into, oh, we're just talking about real estate contracts. Nay, 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 nay. We're not just talking about real estate contracts. We're talking about contract law. So when I said and outlined on the left-hand side, what are the essential elements of a valid contract? I'm simply talking about any contract, okay? Like a contract to buy my guitar off me, okay? Those are the essential elements, C-L-O-C. Those are the essential elements that you need in order to have a valid contract, okay? Now, that being said, let's talk about the difference between bilateral and unilateral first. So we have bilateral and unilateral. So when I'm talking about bilateral and unilateral, I need to make sure that I clarify a couple misnomers, okay? Number one, a lot of people look at these after the explanation and say, oh, you're talking about a contract that has one party or two parties. No, 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 no. I'm talking about something different. When I say something is a unilateral contract, I'm saying it is binding to one party, okay? It is binding to one party, okay? So I'm saying that there are two parties involved, but it is binding to one party, okay? So that is binding to one party. Now, and that I said that for unilateral or bilateral. I know I put it next to bilateral. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to erase stuff because I want to make sure that we're not confused with any of this stuff right now because I want to make sure I'm giving you the right information. So what I'm going to do is move this. Got to do a little homework here sometimes when we're in the classroom. And what I'm going to do is this. Okay, I'm going to put next to unilateral, binding to one party. There we go. Keyboard's so much better, so much more effective. Okay, so a unilateral contract is binding to one party. There we go. Not going to be mistaken there. Now, let's talk about a bilateral contract. So a bilateral contract is one that is a promise for a promise, okay? And now, let me explain the difference for that. You ready? If I have a bilateral contract, I agree to sell you my guitar for $200. What happens is this. There is two promises there, okay? It is a promise for a promise. I am going to give you my guitar. You are going to give me $200, okay? That is a promise in exchange for a promise. Most contracts that we see today are going to be bilateral contracts. They're going to be in the form of, hey, you give me X, I give you Y. You give me X, I give you Y. You give me A, you give me B, okay? That is usually what you'll be more commonly seeing in regards to contracts. So real estate contracts are typically that of bilateral contracts, okay? So a unilateral contract, usually this is an option contract. One of the instructors I work with uses a lost dog poster, okay? Lost dog poster is a unilateral contract, okay? Someone is saying, you can go find my dog. If you do, there's a reward attached to it, but you are under no obligation to go ahead and go find Fluffy McFluffersons, okay? You don't have to find them. Also, sometimes you'll hear an option to purchase. You'll hear a lease with an option to purchase. That is sometimes referred to as another great example of a unilateral contract. The option portion of it, okay? So the option basically is saying, hi, Mr. Tenant, you can buy the property at the end or you cannot, okay? And what happens is this, we have to go by the OREE rule. The OR gives, the EE receives, okay? So what happens is this, in a unilateral option contract, the option or the one who's giving the option typically is the one that is bound to the option, okay? So if I gave you an option to purchase my home, you could choose to exercise your option or you could not. If you were exercising it, meaning that you were like, hey, I'm going to go forward with it, that is binding to me. That is binding to one party, okay? So does everyone get that? Does everyone understand the difference between a bilateral contract and a unilateral contract? So unilaterals are usually our option contracts, and our bilaterals are those promise for a promise, okay? It's one thing in exchange for another, okay? So here's the thing. When I exercise, when I exercise an option contract, so let's say I'm a tenant, right? And I have an option to purchase my landlord's home. If I exercise that, now it has changed into a bilateral contract. I'm going to pay them in exchange for the house, okay? It is turned into a bilateral contract. The next two are going to be that of implied and expressed. So an implied contract is understood through actions, okay? An implied contract is understood through actions. Stu, what do you mean by that it's understood through actions? Well, when I go to sit down at a restaurant and I order a steak, it is implied that they are going to cook the steak for me. They are going to serve it to me. I am going to eat it, then I will pay for it, okay? That is the implication in regards to a implied contract. So that's an implied bilateral contract, okay? There's two parties there. One is going to deliver the steak. That's their promise. I am going to eat and pay for the steak, okay? So a restaurant also going up to a counter at a 7-Eleven, that is an example of a implied contract, right? No one's really expressly saying, hey, if you take that, Mountain Dew out of the store, then that's what's going to happen is you're going to have to pay for it ahead of time. No. What happens is I go up to the counter, I put it down on the counter. That is an implied contract through the actions we are taking. The actions are understanding the contract that is being entered into. Now, an express contract. Terms are clearly defined, okay? Terms are clearly defined. What do I mean by that? The terms are clearly outlined. This could be oral or written, okay? doesn't need to be written. So people always get that confused. They're like, oh, it has to express contracts in writing. No, I could say to you, hey, I will gladly enter into my contract, okay? I will gladly sell you my guitar for $200, okay? So that is an express contract, okay? So saying I will sell you my guitar for $200 is expressed, okay? There's nothing implied about that. We understand the terms that we're entering into very, very clearly. So real estate contracts, okay, are completely expressed. There will never be a real estate contract that's implied. It's not going to be one of those things you go into the open house, you wink at the realtor, they wink back at you, and now you're buying a home. It's not like that, right? I wish it was. I wish it was that easy. But what it is it's going to always be expressed. Now, the last thing that we have here is executory or implied. Executory, there are still promises left to be fulfilled. Okay, so if we're looking at a contract and we're saying, hey, it is a contract for the sale of a property, okay, and there's a contract for the sale of property, and we haven't gotten through the mortgage contingency yet, or we haven't done everything yet. We're waiting for it to close, okay, waiting for financing to come through. Then we would say it is a bilateral expressed executory contract. Executed means it's done, okay? Nothing left to do. So once that home sale closes, it's going to be a bilateral expressed executed contract. So guys, I just want to ask you, do you have any questions in regards to that? Or is that so far so good? We're not really messing you guys up at all with any of that. Just let me know. Type in the chat box. Let me know if you're still with me. Fantastic. Okay. Yeah. And here's the thing. What I'll tell you is this is going to be one of those chapters that a lot of people have trouble with this chapter for the next thing that I'm going to tell you. So everyone understands this part. Okay. This is pretty clear cut. This is pretty simple as a dimple. Okay. The next part, yeah, I'm going to melt some brains, but that's okay. Cause I'm letting you know ahead of time that this is the mind melting part, okay? So I want you to bear with me, okay? Because this is the one that usually on the questions, people get confused on the questions in regards to this one. And that's going to be void, voidable, unenforceable, and enforceable, okay? And I'll also put valid here, okay? So let's talk about these for a second. You ready? So a void contract. A void contract can never be acted on, okay? As it is written, it could never be acted on, never enforced, never anything, okay? And this is usually one that has an illegal component or for an illegal purpose, okay? So it has an illegal component or it has an illegal purpose. So Stu, give us some clarification about that. I sign a contract with you guys to sell 4 pounds of crack cocaine for me. Illegal purpose, okay? Could never be acted on. Now, if we did an illegal component, I want to buy your house, totally cool, totally legit, with 5 pounds of crack cocaine. Not cool anymore. All of a sudden, it got uncool real quick, okay? Those are both examples of void contracts, okay? Voidable means that one party could disaffirm this, okay, or rescind the contract. One party can cancel or rescind the contract, okay? So let me tell you a couple of ways in which a contract would be voidable. Contracts with minors up until the point that they are 18 are voidable on the part of the minor. Okay, so the minor could cancel the contract as long as it is a contract that they legally can enter into. Okay, they cannot enter into a contract to buy 5 cases of Budweiser from me. Can't do it. That's an illegal purpose, okay? A voidable contract is one that is legal, meets all of the legal essential elements of a contract, right? Meets all those. But what happens is it's with a minor, or someone's being put under duress, okay? Or someone is impaired at the time that the contract is signed. Now, you will have differing opinions about if someone who is drunk or inebriated at the time, if it is voidable or unenforceable. Some books will say it's unenforceable. Some will say it is void, okay? But what I will tell you is this. I always say that it is voidable because the person is not deemed to be incompetent, okay? Because an incompetent individual can never sign a contract. That's what I always say. So an incompetent individual is one that the courts have declared legally incompetent. And now what we're getting into is the thick of things, like different examples that you could get. Hence why I'm saying to you, this is the confusing part. This is the part where you would sit there, scratch your head and go, oh boy, wait, what are we talking about here? What's happening? So voidable, one party could cancel or rescind. I say the times and situations that would be the case are under duress, meaning someone has a gun to someone's head to sign a contract, okay? Inebriated means that they're not incompetent, they're not deemed incompetent, they're simply incapacitated at the time or not fully with it, okay? If they were incompetent, I would say it is a void contract because there is an illegal component to it. You cannot enter into a contract with an incompetent individual, okay? And also if someone's drunk or something like that, I would say it is voidable. Unenforceable. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get into something that is kind of in the weeds of things. So when I say that something is unenforceable, what I'm saying is this. It is missing one component, or it lacks enforceability. Enforceability. Now, what do I mean by that? Just let me explain, okay, before you sit there and start scratching your head. An unenforceable contract is not one, here's the kicker, not one that is void, not one that is voidable, okay? So it does not have an illegal component, okay? It does not have a situation that's going to be voidable by one of the parties. So if it falls into one of those categories, okay, not necessarily unenforceable. But an unenforceable contract, basically, so someone said, should all these contracts be notarized to seal the deal when obtaining signatures? No, because here's the thing. That's a great question, actually. I do like that question. Notice how acknowledgement, and that's what they would refer to as acknowledgement, is making sure that there's authenticity to the signatures, is not a legal requirement, okay? Even actually signatures, as you could tell, signatures are not even an essential element of a contract, okay? So notarizing and having a seal affixed to it to have acknowledgement is not an essential element of a contract. So great question. Nope, don't need to be notarized, okay, to be a legal contract. So I really did like that question. Thank you. So going back to unenforceable, a contract that is said to be oral contract for real estate. So the sale of real estate, due to a law called the Statute of Frauds, says that all real estate sales contracts must be in writing, okay? So the contract of sale of real estate that is oral and expressed and bilateral would not be enforceable, okay? Because of the Statute of Frauds. It would be said to be unenforceable. So that means that the courts cannot cannot force you to go forward with it, cannot enforce the validity of it. However, if you do go forward with it, there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Because it doesn't have an illegal component to it. It hasn't been voided by one of the parties that could void it, okay? So what happens is it is also said to be unenforceable contracts, just so you know, are also said to be valid amongst parties. And what that basically means is it's valid between the two parties or the various parties that are involved, but a court of law could not enforce it. And the last one is going to be an enforceable valid contract. And an enforceable valid contract meets all the legal requirements and meets all of the laws that that you would want to be able to meet on that one. There's nothing that says that it would be anything but valid. So that is the situation there. Now let me ask you guys, is there any other questions, concerns, burning desires that you might have? Nothing looks good. Okay. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to stop the recording and ask you guys if there's anything else that we need to cover tonight. So